Hey guys, what's up? It's Biscuit Boo Horror Reviews here with a review of a supernatural, psychological, but Korean horror film from 1981. I'm talking about Suddenly in the Dark, also known as Suddenly in the Night, Suddenly at Midnight, and Suddenly in the Dark Night. I'm going into this one unscripted, so I might trip over my words quite a bit here, so please forgive me for that. Essentially, this family lives in this house out in the woods, and they find a young woman to, help around the house with the housework and help cook and everything like that. And this young woman shows up. She's fairly attractive, and she has this creepy wooden doll she carries around everywhere. The wife character, she begins to suspect that her husband is cheating on her with this new kind of housekeeper, and things get more and more kind of psychological and surreal and weird, and then something devastating happens towards the last, 20 minutes of the movie, and then the last 20 minutes becomes an absolute fucking nightmare. The acting in this film is actually pretty good overall. I think specifically the wife character, the actress for that character specifically does a very good job of portraying a very paranoid, on edge, stay-at-home mom who is very protective of her husband and her daughter. The husband character is kind of, one-dimensional. He's just consistently telling his wife, calm down, you're acting crazy, you need psychological evaluation. And the film, as a whole, very much gives off this kind of the yellow wallpaper vibe of the main character. They might not be mentally unstable or crazy, and everybody else around them is telling them that they're crazy, and is hoping to put pressure on them to make them believe that they're crazy. Very similar to that short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. As far as the writing goes, writing is alright. Really, everything in this movie is, either good or alright. Up until you get to the visual aesthetic of the film, as well as some of the effects and surreal moments of the film, because that is where the film really shines. There's crazy colorful lighting, weird kind of surreal kaleidoscope camera effects they use. Different lenses are used to provide different visual effects on top of these surrealist scenes. And to top it off, it's got that kind of black magic kind of horror aesthetic that a lot of 80s and 70s Hong Kong and Korean and Asian films did at the time. Comparable to The Boxer's Omen or Black Magic or The Oily Maniac. Although I would argue this film is nowhere near as good as any of those. I'd still say this movie is pretty damn interesting visually. If I have to have one major problem with the film, it's the pacing. Not that the pacing is necessarily bad in this movie. The problem I have with it is that it's very much a slow burn kind of film. And I'm not saying I don't like slow burn movies. So don't get me wrong, I can dig a slow burn kind of film. It's just these kinds of movies are films I have to be in the mood for in order to enjoy them. And that's one of the problems I had with Suddenly in the Dark, is that I only got about 4 hours of sleep last night, and I decided, hey, let's watch this atmospheric, slow burn horror film today, and I ended up falling asleep a few times watching this movie, and I had to rewind it a few times. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying I fell asleep because it was boring. Don't get me wrong. The pacing is slow, it's a slow burn, but I wouldn't say the film is necessarily that boring. There's some household drama going on that I thought was pretty interesting. It's just I only got 4 hours of sleep last night because I'm a fucking idiot. That being said, though, every about, I want to say, 10-15 minutes, there's an interesting kind of surreal moment in the film, which is just often enough to keep it interesting while still maintaining that slow pace. It's the last 20 minutes of this film that I really, really dig. Very similar to the 60s Japanese horror film Jingoku, also known as The Sinners of Hell. That's a film that very much is, like, for the most part, the movie itself throughout the entire thing is alright, you know, it's pretty good. Although Jingoku is definitely slower and a lot less interesting than Suddenly in the Dark, mind you, overall. But with Jingoku and with Suddenly in the Dark, in the last, like, 20 minutes of it, it becomes like a nightmare on film, and it becomes very surreal and weird, and it's exactly what, you know, you want out of the film going in. Really, if there's one reason you're going to watch this movie, and there's one reason I could recommend this movie, it's that last 20 minutes. That last 20 minutes makes the entire runtime worth it. Again, I'm not necessarily saying that the first, like, hour and 20 minutes isn't good, mind you, because it's good for what it is. It's interesting enough. It keeps you engaged. Even if I fell asleep watching it, it's good enough. But that last 20 minutes is like everything that you want this movie to be. And that's kind of all I have to say about it. Visually, from a visual standpoint, it's a very interesting, very well made movie. On the Gore Meter from 1 to 10, 1 being something like Nosferatu and 10 being something like Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, Suddenly in the Dark is probably like a 2. It's really not that gory at all. There's some blood and death towards the end of the movie that is pretty damn good, but it's nothing super explicit. Overall, I don't know if I guess I can recommend this movie. Like, it's interesting enough to be worth at least one watch. That last 20 minutes definitely makes it worth it. Again, very similar to The Sinners of Hell, the Japanese 60s horror film. It's a movie that is worth watching strictly for the last 20 minutes alone. But watching that first hour definitely does help you get into it and help you appreciate the last 20 minutes a lot more. It's a slow burn horror film. There's some decent atmosphere going on here. A little bit cheesy at times, but overall very, very enjoyable, or at least not very enjoyable, but pretty damn enjoyable. And I guess I would have to give this one like a 3 out of 5. It's far from perfect, but it's definitely worth a watch if this is your kind of cup of tea. So anyway, guys, that's it for this one. This is Biscuit Horror Reviews, signing off. Peace.